Sarah Chen had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. It was what made her exceptional at her job as a senior cybersecurity analyst at Meridian Defense Systems, one of the largest government contractors in the country. For 8 years, she had spent her days diving deep into digital networks, hunting for threats, and protecting classified information that could impact national security. But today was different. Today was her last day. The decision hadn't been easy. Sarah had spent months wrestling with what she had discovered 3 weeks ago during a routine security audit. Hidden deep within the company's internal systems, she had found something that made her stomach turn. It wasn't just a security breach or a simple case of corporate negligence. What she had uncovered was evidence of deliberate data manipulation, classified information being altered before it reached government officials, and worst of all, signs that foreign entities had been granted backdoor access to sensitive military communications. Sarah had tried to report her findings through proper channels. She had documented everything meticulously, created detailed reports, and presented them to her immediate supervisor, James Rodriguez. James had listened with a grave expression, promised to escalate the matter to senior leadership, and assured her that appropriate action would be taken. That was 3 weeks ago, and nothing had happened. In fact, things had gotten worse. The manipulated data continued to flow, the backdoor access remained active, and Sarah began to notice that her own access permissions were being quietly restricted. Files she had previously been able to view were now blocked. Security clearances that had been routine for her were suddenly requiring additional approvals. Most disturbing of all, she discovered that her computer activity was being monitored far beyond normal company protocols. Sarah wasn't paranoid by nature, but 8 years in cybersecurity had taught her to recognize surveillance when she saw it. Someone was watching her, and they knew that she knew. The final straw came yesterday when she discovered that her original reports about the security breach had been deleted from the company's servers. Not just archived or moved to a restricted folder, but completely erased as if they had never existed. When she confronted James about it, he claimed to have no knowledge of what she was talking about and suggested she might be confused about what she had submitted. That night, Sarah had made her decision. She would submit her resignation and remove herself from a situation that was becoming increasingly dangerous. She had copies of all her evidence stored safely outside the company's network, and she would find another way to ensure the right people learned the truth. Her resignation letter was simple and professional. Personal reasons, she had written. A desire to pursue new opportunities. She thanked the company for the valuable experience and expressed her commitment to ensuring a smooth transition of her responsibilities. She made no mention of what she had discovered or why she was really leaving. Sarah had arrived at work early that morning, wanting to complete her final tasks and clear out her office before most of her colleagues arrived. The building was quiet, with only the overnight security guards and a few other early arrivals moving through the corridors. She had spent the morning systematically going through her files, ensuring that any sensitive work was properly documented and transferred to her replacement. As she worked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched more closely than usual. The security cameras that had always been present throughout the building seemed more noticeable today. She caught glimpses of unfamiliar faces in the hallway, people she didn't recognize despite her 8 years at the company. When she asked Marcus, one of the security guards she knew well, about the new faces, he just shrugged and said there had been some changes in staffing lately. By noon, Sarah had finished transferring her active cases to other team members. She had written detailed handover notes for her replacement and organized her digital files according to company protocol. Everything was in order. All that remained was to pack up her personal belongings and submit her security badge and access cards to Human Resources. Her office had accumulated 8 years of memories, photos of company events, awards for exceptional performance, thank you notes from colleagues whose problems she had solved. As she packed these items into a cardboard box, Sarah felt a mixture of sadness and relief. She was leaving behind a job she had loved and colleagues she respected, but she was also escaping a situation that had become untenable. James stopped by her office around 2 o'clock. He seemed nervous, more so than usual, and kept glancing toward the hallway as they talked. "I'm sorry to see you go, Sarah," he said, though his tone suggested he might actually be relieved. "You've been an asset to the team. I hope you'll reconsider if the right opportunity comes along in the future." Sarah nodded politely, but she noticed that James didn't meet her eyes when he spoke. She also noticed that he seemed to be looking at her computer screen, as if checking to see what she was working on. "I appreciate everything you've taught me," she replied carefully. "I'm sure the team will continue to do excellent work." After James left, Sarah completed her final task, running a comprehensive security scan of her own computer to ensure that no personal information or unauthorized copies of company data remained on the system. The scan revealed something troubling. Her computer had been remotely accessed multiple times over the past week, including sessions that occurred when she wasn't even in the office. Someone had been going through her files, her emails, her research notes. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she reviewed the access logs. The remote sessions had been thorough and professional, the work of someone with advanced technical skills and high-level access permissions. Whoever had been monitoring her wasn't just a curious supervisor. This was surveillance by someone with the authority and capability to access any system they wanted. At 4:30, Sarah packed the last of her personal items and locked her computer for the final time. She walked down the hallway toward Human Resources, carrying her cardboard box and wearing what she hoped was an expression of calm professionalism. Colleagues she passed offered friendly goodbyes and wishes for success in her future endeavors. If any of them suspected the real reason for her departure, they gave no sign of it. The Human Resources office was located on the 3rd floor, in a section of the building she rarely visited. Janet Walsh, the HR director, was waiting for her with a stack of paperwork and a practiced smile. "We're sorry to lose you, Sarah," Janet said as she processed the resignation paperwork. "Exit interviews are usually conducted by your direct supervisor, but James mentioned that you preferred to keep things simple." Sarah nodded, grateful that she wouldn't have to sit through a formal interview where she might be pressed for details about her decision to leave. She signed the required documents, returned her security badge and access cards, and listened to the standard speech about confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure obligations. "Your final paycheck will be direct deposited as usual," Janet explained, "and of course, your security clearances will be processed according to standard procedures. Someone from the security office may contact you in the next few days to schedule a debriefing, but that's just routine for anyone in your position." Sarah felt a chill at the mention of a security debriefing, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course. I understand." By 5:15, Sarah was walking toward the main exit of the Meridian Defense Systems building for the last time. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Her car was parked in the employee section, about 100 yards from the main entrance. As she walked, Sarah felt a tremendous sense of relief washing over her. Whatever came next, she was no longer part of whatever was happening inside that building. She reached her car, a modest sedan that had served her well for the past 4 years, and placed her box of personal belongings in the trunk. As she sat behind the wheel and started the engine, Sarah allowed herself a moment to process what she had just done. She had walked away from a well-paying job, excellent benefits, and a career she had spent years building. But she had also extracted herself from a situation that had become morally and possibly physically dangerous. Sarah pulled out of her parking space and drove toward the main gate. The security guard she didn't recognize waved her through with a polite smile. As she turned onto the public road that led away from the Meridian facility, Sarah felt like she could breathe freely for the first time in weeks. She had driven about 2 miles when she heard the helicopters. At first, it was just a distant sound, the familiar whoop, whoop, whoop of rotor blades that was common in this area due to the nearby military base. But the sound was growing louder, and it seemed to be coming from multiple aircraft. Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror and saw two black helicopters approaching fast and low. Her first thought was that it might be a military exercise or a VIP transport. The area around Meridian Defense Systems often saw military aircraft due to the classified nature of much of the company's work. But as the helicopters drew closer, Sarah realized they weren't just passing overhead. They were following the road, following her car. Sarah's heart began to race as she watched the helicopters in her mirror. They were flying in formation, maintaining a steady distance behind her vehicle. This wasn't a coincidence or a military exercise. They were tracking her. She pressed harder on the accelerator, but the helicopters easily kept pace. The road ahead was relatively straight and empty, offering no immediate options for evasion or escape. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, but none of them were reassuring. Then she saw the roadblock. About half a mile ahead, emergency vehicles were positioned across both lanes of the highway. Police cars, unmarked SUVs with government plates, and what appeared to be federal agents in tactical gear. They weren't stopping traffic for an accident or a routine checkpoint. They were waiting specifically for her. The helicopters moved closer, one positioning itself directly overhead while the other circled to her left. Through her open window, Sarah could hear the powerful voice of a loudspeaker cutting through the noise of the rotors. "Driver of the silver sedan, license plate number 847GHT, pull over immediately and exit your vehicle with your hands visible." Sarah's hands were shaking as she realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't a routine security debriefing or a corporate investigation. This was a federal operation with helicopters, roadblocks, and armed personnel. Whatever she had discovered at Meridian Defense Systems was bigger and more dangerous than she had imagined. She had no choice but to comply. Sarah gradually reduced her speed and pulled onto the shoulder of the road, about 200 yards from the roadblock. As she turned off the engine, she could see agents approaching her car from multiple directions, their weapons drawn but not directly aimed at her. The loudspeaker crackled again, this time from one of the vehicles at the roadblock. "Exit the vehicle slowly with your hands visible and walk toward the agents. Do not reach for anything. Do not make any sudden movements." Sarah took a deep breath, opened her car door, and stepped onto the asphalt with her hands raised. The afternoon sun felt warm on her face, in stark contrast to the cold fear coursing through her body. As she walked slowly toward the waiting agents, one thought echoed through her mind. Her last day at Meridian Defense Systems was far from over. The federal agent who approached Sarah was a woman in her 40s with short brown hair and the kind of steady gaze that suggested years of experience in high-stakes situations. She wore a dark suit with a badge visible on her belt and moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being in charge. "Ms. Chen, I'm Agent Rebecca Martinez with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I need you to remain calm and cooperate fully. You're not under arrest at this time, but we have some very serious matters to discuss." Sarah nodded, trying to process the surreal nature of her situation. 20 minutes ago, she had been driving away from her old job, looking forward to the freedom of unemployment. Now she was standing on a highway surrounded by federal agents while helicopters circled overhead. "I don't understand what this is about," Sarah managed to say, though she had a growing suspicion that her discoveries at Meridian were somehow connected to this dramatic response. Agent Martinez gestured toward one of the unmarked SUVs. "We'll explain everything, but not here. We need to move to a secure location where we can have a proper conversation." As they walked toward the vehicle, Sarah noticed the level of coordination in the operation. The agents moved with military precision. The helicopters maintained their positions without apparent effort, and the roadblock had been set up with a thoroughness that suggested significant advance planning. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment response to her resignation. They had been preparing for this. The interior of the SUV was equipped with communication equipment and what appeared to be signal jamming devices. Agent Martinez sat across from Sarah while another agent took the driver's seat. As they pulled away from the scene, Sarah watched through the tinted windows as the roadblock was quickly dismantled and the helicopters began to disperse. "Where are you taking me?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "A federal facility where we can talk privately," Martinez replied. "Ms. Chen, I want to be clear about something from the start. We know why you resigned from Meridian Defense Systems today. We know what you discovered, and we know you've been trying to report it through proper channels." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. If the FBI already knew about the security breaches and data manipulation she had uncovered, then perhaps she wasn't in trouble for discovering them. But if they had known all along, why hadn't they acted sooner? "If you know about the problems at Meridian, why are you stopping me instead of investigating the company?" Sarah asked. Agent Martinez exchanged a glance with her colleague in the front seat before answering. "Because the situation is more complex than you realize, and your departure today triggered a series of events that we've been working to prevent for months." The federal facility turned out to be a nondescript office building about 15 miles from where Sarah had been stopped. From the outside, it looked like any other government building, but once inside, Sarah could see the sophisticated security measures and specialized equipment that marked it as something more significant. She was escorted to a conference room on the third floor, where Agent Martinez was joined by two other officials. One introduced himself as Director William Hayes from the National Security Agency, while the other was Deputy Director Susan Park from the Department of Homeland Security. The presence of such high-ranking officials made it clear that whatever was happening involved national security at the highest levels. "Ms. Chen," Director Hayes began, "let me start by saying that your work at Meridian Defense Systems has been exemplary, and your discovery of the security issues there was exactly what we hoped would happen." Sarah blinked in confusion. "What you hoped would happen?" Deputy Director Park leaned forward. 3 months ago, our agencies received intelligence suggesting that Meridian Defense Systems had been compromised by a foreign adversary. We needed someone inside the company with the technical expertise and security clearance to investigate, someone who would discover the problems through normal work processes. "You used me," Sarah said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You knew I would find the security breaches because you were watching for them," Agent Martinez nodded. "We've been monitoring the situation closely, but we needed internal verification from someone with your skills and clearance level. Your reports 3 weeks ago confirmed what we suspected, but they also revealed that the compromise was more extensive than we initially believed." Director Hayes opened a thick folder and spread several documents across the table. Sarah recognized some of them as her own reports, but others appeared to be intelligence briefings and surveillance records she had never seen before. "What you discovered wasn't just corporate espionage or simple data theft," Hayes explained. "Meridian Defense Systems handles communication protocols for several critical military systems. The backdoor access you identified has been used to intercept and modify strategic communications for at least 6 months. Sarah studied the documents, seeing her own findings presented alongside intelligence reports that painted a much larger picture. The data manipulation she had uncovered was part of a sophisticated operation designed to feed false information to military commanders in the field. The modified communications have affected military operations in 3 different regions, Deputy Director Park added. Supply convoys have been misdirected, patrol schedules have been compromised, and in 2 cases, false intelligence led to unnecessary casualties. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. She had known that the security breaches were serious, but she hadn't fully grasped the human cost of what was happening. When you submitted your resignation today, Agent Martinez continued, it triggered automated security protocols within Meridian systems. The foreign operatives who had been using the backdoor access realized that their operation had been discovered, and they began implementing emergency procedures to cover their tracks. Director Hayes pulled up a laptop and turned the screen toward Sarah. It showed a real-time feed of network activity from Meridian defense systems, with data streams highlighted in different colors to indicate various types of traffic. Starting about an hour after you left the building, we detected massive data deletion and system modification activity, he explained. They're trying to erase all evidence of their presence and shut down their access points. We estimate that within the next few hours, any proof of their operation will be completely eliminated. Sarah watched the screen, recognizing the patterns of activity as systematic and professional. Whoever was behind this had clearly planned for the possibility of discovery and had sophisticated tools for covering their tracks. That's why we had to intercept you immediately, Deputy Director Park said. You have information and evidence that will be crucial for our counterintelligence operation, but more importantly, your departure may have put you in personal danger. What kind of danger? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand that the situation was far more serious than she had imagined. Agent Martinez opened another file. The operation at Meridian involves at least 3 foreign intelligence agents who have been working under deep cover for over 2 years. One of them is someone you know well. She slid a photograph across the table. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the face staring back at her. It was James Rodriguez, her immediate supervisor. James has been feeding information about your activities to his handlers, Martinez explained. When you first reported the security breaches 3 weeks ago, he immediately alerted them to the discovery. They've been monitoring your every move since then, trying to determine how much you knew and whether you posed a threat to their operation. Sarah thought back to all her interactions with James over the past 3 weeks, remembering his nervous behavior and the way he had avoided eye contact during their conversations. She also remembered how quickly her reports had disappeared from the company's servers and how her computer access had been gradually restricted. He's been in my office, at my computer, she said, the full scope of the betrayal becoming clear. He knew everything I was working on, which is why your safety became a concern, Director Hayes said. When you submitted your resignation and began the process of leaving the company, James's handlers had to decide whether to let you go or take more direct action to prevent you from exposing their operation. Deputy Director Park activated a secure communication device and spoke briefly into it before turning back to Sarah. We intercepted communications indicating that they were planning to approach you tonight, possibly at your home. The intercept operation on the highway was as much about protecting you as it was about preserving the evidence you possess. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized how close she might have come to a very different kind of encounter. What happens now? Agent Martinez consulted her notes. We need your full cooperation in documenting everything you discovered at Meridian. Your technical expertise will be crucial in understanding exactly how the foreign operatives gained access to the systems and what information they were able to compromise. But first, Director Hayes added, we need to extract you from this situation safely. The operatives at Meridian now know that their cover has been blown, but they don't know the extent of our knowledge about their activities. We want to keep it that way while we roll up the rest of their network. Over the next 2 hours, Sarah provided detailed technical briefings about every aspect of her discoveries at Meridian Defense Systems. She walked the federal agents through the security vulnerabilities she had identified, the patterns of data manipulation she had observed, and the evidence she had collected of unauthorized access to classified communications. The agents were particularly interested in her analysis of the backdoor access points, which she had documented with the thoroughness of someone who understood the critical importance of accurate technical intelligence. Her detailed logs and system captures provided a complete picture of how the foreign operatives had penetrated and exploited Meridian's networks. As the briefing continued, Sarah began to understand that her role in the situation was far from over. The evidence she had collected was crucial not only for understanding what had happened, but for preventing similar operations at other defense contractors. "We believe Meridian was a test case," Deputy Director Park explained. "If the operatives had been able to maintain their access indefinitely, they would have used the same techniques to infiltrate other companies with defense contracts. Your discovery may have prevented a much larger compromise of our defense communications infrastructure." Director Hayes closed his laptop and looked directly at Sarah. "Miss Chen, I want to be honest with you about what comes next. This investigation is going to take months, possibly years. We'll need your continued cooperation as we work to understand the full extent of the compromise and identify other potential targets." "What about my job? My life?" Sarah asked. "I can't exactly go back to work at Meridian tomorrow morning." Agent Martinez smiled for the first time since they had met. "Actually, that's exactly what we're going to ask you to do, but not as a Meridian employee. As a federal agent working undercover to help us gather additional evidence and monitor James Rodriguez's activities." The proposal was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah had never imagined herself as an undercover agent, but she understood the logic of the request. She had the technical expertise, the security clearances, and the established relationships necessary to continue the investigation from inside Meridian. "Think about it overnight," Director Hayes said. "We'll arrange secure accommodation for you while you consider our offer. But I want you to understand something clearly. Whether you agree to work undercover or not, your old life has changed permanently. The knowledge you possess about this operation makes you a valuable asset to our government and a potential target for hostile intelligence services." As the meeting concluded, Sarah realized that her decision to resign from Meridian Defense Systems that morning had been just the beginning of a much larger and more complex story. The helicopters that had intercepted her on the highway had not just stopped her from driving home. They had redirected her into a world of espionage and counterintelligence that she was only beginning to understand. Agent Martinez escorted her to a secure facility where she would spend the night, but as they walked through the corridors, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about James Rodriguez and the other operatives who were still at Meridian, still working to cover their tracks and protect their mission. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to return to that building as a federal agent, knowing that her former supervisor was actually a foreign spy who had been watching her every move. The weight of that decision would determine not only her own future, but potentially the security of military communication systems that protected thousands of service members around the world. Sarah spent most of that night staring at the ceiling of her temporary room in the federal safe house, weighing the impossible decision before her. By morning, she had reached a conclusion that surprised even herself. When Agent Martinez arrived with coffee and a secure phone for her to make any necessary personal calls, Sarah was already dressed and waiting. "I'll do it," she said simply. "I'll go back to Meridian as an undercover agent." Martinez set down the coffee and studied Sarah's face carefully. "Are you certain? Once you cross this line, there's no going back to your old life. You'll be operating in a dangerous environment where one mistake could cost you your life." Sarah had thought about that extensively during the sleepless hours before dawn. Those military personnel who died because of false intelligence deserve justice, and if this operation is being replicated at other defense contractors, more people are going to die unless we stop it. Within 2 hours, Sarah was back in the federal building, receiving intensive training in undercover operations. The crash course covered everything from covert communication methods to personal safety protocols. She was fitted with nearly invisible recording devices and given a secure communication device disguised as an ordinary smartphone. "Your cover story is simple," Director Hayes explained. You experienced a family emergency yesterday that required you to leave work suddenly. You're apologetic about the abrupt departure and grateful that the company is willing to take you back. James Rodriguez will likely be suspicious, but he'll also be under pressure to maintain his own cover. The most challenging aspect of the training was learning to interact normally with James while knowing that he was a foreign operative who had been monitoring her activities and possibly planning to harm her. Sarah practiced maintaining eye contact, controlling her voice, and responding naturally to his questions. Remember, Agent Martinez emphasized, James is a trained intelligence professional. He'll be watching for any sign that you've discovered his true identity. Your safety depends on convincing him that you're still the same trusting colleague you were before yesterday. Deputy Director Park provided Sarah with her specific mission objectives. We need you to gather evidence about the other operatives in James's network. We know there are at least 2 others at Meridian, but we don't know their identities. We also need detailed technical intelligence about how they're maintaining their access to classified systems. The plan called for Sarah to return to Meridian the following Monday morning, claiming that her family emergency had been resolved. She would resume her normal duties while secretly documenting the espionage activities around her. The federal agents would maintain constant surveillance, but Sarah would be essentially on her own inside the building. Monday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Sarah's mood as she drove back to the Meridian Defense Systems parking lot. The building looked exactly the same as it had when she left on Friday afternoon, but Sarah saw it now through different eyes. Somewhere inside those walls were foreign operatives working to undermine American national security. James Rodriguez was waiting in her office when she arrived, and Sarah had to summon all her training to appear surprised rather than terrified. "Sarah, thank God you're back," he said, standing up from her desk chair. "Human Resources said you had a family emergency. I hope everything worked out okay." Sarah forced a smile and set down her purse, trying to appear like someone returning to work after a personal crisis, rather than someone who now knew her supervisor was a foreign spy. "My mother had a heart attack," she said, using the cover story the federal agents had helped her develop. "I had to fly to Seattle to help my father deal with the medical situation. It was touch and go for a while, but she's stable now." James nodded sympathetically, but Sarah noticed that his eyes were carefully watching her face, looking for any sign of deception. "I'm glad she's doing better. We missed having you here, especially with the security audit that came up over the weekend." This was news to Sarah and genuinely concerning. "What kind of security audit?" "Internal review," James said casually, but Sarah detected tension in his voice. "Some routine checks of our network security protocols. Nothing major, but it required going through a lot of system logs and access records. I had to pull some of your old reports to verify our compliance with federal standards." Sarah realized that James was probing to see if she knew anything about the federal investigation. The security audit was likely the government's initial response to the intelligence she had provided during her debriefing. "I hope my sudden absence didn't cause any problems with the audit," she said, maintaining her innocent tone while her heart raced. "Not at all," James replied, "though there were some questions about the reports you submitted a few weeks ago regarding potential security vulnerabilities. The auditors wanted to review your methodology and findings." This confirmed Sarah's suspicion that James and his handlers were trying to understand how much the government knew about their operation. She decided to take a calculated risk to gather more intelligence. "The reports about the backdoor access issues?" she asked. "I thought those had been resolved after our conversation." James's expression shifted slightly, and Sarah caught a flash of something that might have been alarm before he regained his composure. "Actually, the audit raised some additional questions about those findings," he said carefully. "The auditors want to meet with you this afternoon to go over your technical analysis in more detail." Sarah nodded as if this were perfectly normal, but she was already planning how to communicate this development to her federal handlers. If James was arranging a meeting between her and other auditors, it might be an opportunity to identify the other operatives in his network. The morning passed slowly as Sarah attempted to resume her normal work routine while secretly documenting everything around her. She noticed that her computer access had been restored to its previous levels, suggesting that James wanted to maintain the appearance that nothing had changed. At noon, she used her lunch break to make contact with Agent Martinez through the secure communication protocols she had been taught. The response came back within minutes. Proceed with the afternoon meeting, but maintain constant communication through the hidden recording devices. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock in Conference Room B, a secure area on the 4th floor that Sarah had rarely visited. When she arrived, she found James waiting with 2 people she didn't recognize. One was a middle-aged woman in a business suit who introduced herself as Dr. Linda Kim from the company's security compliance department. The other was a younger man in his 30s who claimed to be Marcus Webb from the IT audit division. Sarah's training kicked in as she shook hands with both strangers, memorizing their faces and noting details about their appearance that she could report to the federal agents. Dr. Kim had a slight accent that might have been Eastern European, while Marcus Webb wore an expensive watch that seemed inconsistent with a government auditor's salary. "Thank you for taking time to meet with us, Sarah," Dr. Kim began. "We're conducting a comprehensive review of all security protocols and procedures, and your recent reports have raised some important questions." For the next hour, the 3 supposed auditors questioned Sarah extensively about her methods for detecting the security vulnerabilities she had reported. They wanted to know exactly how she had identified the backdoor access points, what tools she had used to analyze the data manipulation, and whether she had shared her findings with anyone outside the company. Sarah answered their questions carefully, providing technical details while being mindful not to reveal anything that might compromise the federal investigation. She could sense that they were testing her, trying to determine whether her discoveries had been accidental or whether she had been specifically looking for evidence of their operation. The most dangerous moment came when Marcus Webb asked whether she had made any copies of her reports or supporting data before they were removed from the company's servers. "I always back up my work," Sarah replied truthfully, "but I follow standard protocols for handling classified information. Any copies would be stored according to security regulations." This seemed to satisfy the questioners, though Sarah noticed Dr. Kim and James exchange a meaningful glance that confirmed her suspicion that this meeting was actually an intelligence debrief conducted by foreign operatives. As the meeting concluded, James walked Sarah back to her office, maintaining friendly conversation while subtly probing for any additional information about her activities over the weekend. "I'm glad you were able to resolve your family situation so quickly," he said as they reached her desk. "It must have been stressful to handle everything on your own." Sarah realized this was another test. James was trying to determine whether she had been alone during her absence or whether she might have been in contact with law enforcement or intelligence agencies. "Actually, my brother helped with most of the arrangements," she replied, providing details from her cover story. "I mainly just provided emotional support for my parents, while the doctors did their work." That evening, Sarah met with Agent Martinez and Director Hayes at a secure location to debrief about her first day back at Meridian. The recording devices she had worn captured clear audio of the entire fake audit meeting, providing the federal investigators with valuable intelligence about the other operatives in James's network. Dr. Linda Kim is actually Svetlana Volkov, a Russian intelligence officer who entered the country 2 years ago using forged credentials, Martinez revealed. Marcus Webb is Chen Wei-Ming, a Chinese national who has been working under deep cover for at least 3 years. Director Hayes spread photos and intelligence files across the table. "This is bigger than we initially realized. We're looking at a joint operation between Russian and Chinese intelligence services, using Meridian as a testing ground for techniques they plan to deploy against other defense contractors. The scope of the operation was staggering. Over the following days, Sarah continued her undercover work while the federal agencies coordinated a comprehensive response. She documented additional evidence of system compromises, identified other employees who might be unwitting accomplices, and provided real-time intelligence about the operatives' activities. The breakthrough came on Thursday morning when Sarah discovered that the foreign operatives were planning to extract their remaining assets from Meridian and shut down the operation entirely. Intercepted communications indicated they had become too suspicious of the increased security attention to continue their mission safely. They're planning to leave this weekend, Agent Martinez informed Sarah during an emergency briefing. We need to move quickly to arrest all 3 operatives and secure the evidence before they can escape or destroy additional data. The coordinated takedown was scheduled for Friday morning, timed to catch all 3 operatives at the Meridian facility. Sarah's role was to maintain her normal routine while federal agents positioned themselves throughout the building. As Friday morning progressed, Sarah felt the tension building around her. James seemed more nervous than usual, frequently checking his phone and making brief phone calls in languages she didn't recognize. Dr. Kim and Marcus Webb appeared at the facility earlier than normal, ostensibly for another security audit, but actually to coordinate their departure preparations. At exactly 11 o'clock, Sarah received a text message with a single word: execute. Throughout the Meridian building, federal agents simultaneously moved to arrest the 3 foreign operatives. Sarah remained at her desk, trying to appear focused on her work while listening to the sounds of shouting and footsteps in the corridors around her. James Rodriguez was arrested in his office while attempting to destroy files on his computer. Svetlana Volkov, alias Dr. Linda Kim, was taken into custody in the parking garage as she tried to load boxes of documents into her car. Chen Wei-Ming, alias Marcus Webb, was apprehended in the building's server room, where he had been attempting to install additional data destruction malware. The arrests sent shockwaves through the Meridian facility, but the federal agents had coordinated with company management to minimize disruption to legitimate operations. Most employees were simply told that a security incident was being investigated and that normal work could continue. For Sarah, the conclusion of the operation brought a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Her undercover mission was complete. But her life had been permanently changed by her decision to investigate the security vulnerabilities she had discovered. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of the espionage operation became clear. The foreign operatives had compromised not only Meridian systems, but had also been gathering intelligence about other defense contractors and government agencies. The information Sarah had provided was crucial in preventing similar operations at dozens of other facilities across the country. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood before a closed session of a Congressional Intelligence Committee, receiving recognition for her service to national security. She had accepted a permanent position with the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, where her technical expertise and experience with corporate espionage made her an invaluable asset. As she looked back on that Friday afternoon when she had simply wanted to quit her job and drive home to start a new chapter of her life, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important journeys begin when helicopters land and demand that you return. Her decision to walk out of Meridian Defense Systems had led her into a world of danger and deception, but it had also given her the opportunity to protect her country and save lives. The woman who had once noticed things others missed had become someone who helped ensure that the right people were watching when national security was at stake.